Still waiting.
We're live.
It is? How come it's always goes live, but for me, and I'm the one starting,
Right.
it's still saying thinking. Anyway, I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
We are the CRM Playaz, and you know when it's not 3 o'clock on a Thursday, something's going on.
Oh no, LinkedIn crashed again.
Maybe LinkedIn didn't, but looks like some of the other ones might have. So we'll just keep playing it by ear. Now it says we're live all across the board. We are live. This is fun. You know what? You can always tell when it's a special occasion for the CRM Playaz. When I bust out a never worn before Ram shirt or hat.
Whoa. Well, that one matches too.
Yeah, well, you know, I try.
But
it is special. Too. This is the second ever CRM Playaz Executive Roundtable Conversation live stream. It feels pretty good to be doing this again.
Yeah, I miss these discussions. We have all this rolling conversation and good cheer and camaraderie.
And it's never really a show, at least the start of a show, unless we get the very first hello, and it's always from Sven. And this time it's all English. So, hey there, Sven. Yes, we are ready for the event chat. Give us a little taste of another language too when you get a chance.
Maybe that is the language. Event chat's actually something hello in some other language.
Anyway, so no, this is really cool. We're really excited to be doing the second CRM Playaz Executive Roundtable conversation. We're going to get into the kind of the format for today and who's going to be joining us and all the things that we're going to be doing. And look, it's already starting. The comments are already flowing in, which we really love the comments flowing in. I just hope that I'll be able to at least try to keep up a little bit and try to pop them on the screen. But hey, bring them on. So before we get into what we're going to do today, can I just do a little shout out? I just want to shout out Zoho. They just did their Analyst Day event. And I have to say it went off without a hitch. It was great. The content was great. And their platform, their Zoho backstage platform, it might be the unsung star of the show.
Well, I have to tell you, we looked at a lot of, just in the nature of what we've been doing, we looked at a lot of event platforms, and honestly, that one is the best one I've seen to date. I don't know if it scales yet, but I will tell you this. If you're running an analyst summit, it's literally a perfect platform. Perfect. It's just flawless.
You know what I liked? And I'm not going to call out anybody else or any other vendors, but I liked how they encouraged the chat. They encouraged us to interact not only with them, but also between the analysts. And they had, I think at one point I saw like 160 people on that thing. And I appreciate them not trying to own the conversation, but just, reinforce the conversation.
Well, if you remember the word, I think Sandy used was, she was there to facilitate, not to, what was the word? To facilitate, but not to control it, right? She was just there simply to help facilitate. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, the analysts had access to each other, which was, unfortunately, we're seeing some times where that doesn't happen. And that's just to me, a ridiculous mistake. And at the same time, you had direct access constantly to the executive team. And it was an ongoing access. It wasn't like, there were presentations, but there was always available time to communicate directly with the executive team at varying levels. And it was just really perfectly done.
Really was. And it's kind of nice to set the table for what we're going to do. So, when we talk a little bit about what we're actually supposed to be doing here. This is good. I mean, this is why we're all here. We're going to spend some really good quality time with leading vendors and leading executives at those vendors. So you have something to say before I start rolling to the agenda a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, just one thing on this group. I mean, they are heavy hitting players. And the interesting thing about them, some have been around a while. Some of them are revamping their business models to actually focus in around CRM CX. Others have transformed themselves over several years. Some, two of them have been, around 15, 20 years and have been pretty much focused on where they are, but evolved it. I mean, it's been amazing to see the growth of these companies over the last several years in particular. And what makes this panel exceptional is that these are the executives who are driving it. And at the same time, each of these companies is having an increasing, they've always had an impact, and a lot of times a pretty serious one, but they're increasing their impact. You're seeing, this is like the new wave, basically, right here. This is a new wave group of companies that are impacting the industries that we're all in now.
I love the comments and keep them coming as we go through this. All right, so let's just set the table for the agenda for this here. So we're doing our little, pre-panelist conversation, table setting and all that kind of stuff. But we really look to get started with the panel, doing the panel introductions and then jump right into it. About 1:45, and we're going to have basically like 75 minutes to just talk and hear from the experts, toss out a couple of themes. We don't have we're not going to be following a script. We have some themes that we think may need to come up, but we're going to kind of let the conversation go where it needs to go organically. So we'll see what happens. And we also are going to be looking at your comments and your questions, and if we're able to bring them in, we're definitely going to do that. And maybe a couple of surprising things as well. But then once we're done with the kind of the official panel, do not leave, because we also have a lot of stuff coming up afterwards. We're going to do our little recap. Yeah, that's an order. Don't you dare leave that.
That's an order, soldier.
Yeah, because we got a lot of good, it's almost like, you watch the game, which is the panel, and then you don't leave after the game is in. You got to hear the game analysis, the talk, the feedback, all that. So that's what we're going to be doing after that. Me and Paul are going to do our first impressions. Then we're going to bring on, we can't do one of these without having the players in residence, so they're going to get on. Matter of fact, let's do a quick hello.
Wow, that was like an ideal
Mark, it's like a multitasking challenge. I hear Brent, I'm like,
that was a Monty Python moment.
I must apologize because that was not planned, me bringing them on like that. But when we talk about them and they're right there, it just feels natural to bring them on and say hello, Ginger. Hey. Hello, El Nicole.
How you guys?
Hey, everybody.
That was really kind of awesome. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, we're gonna let them go back to hanging out in the green room. El Nicole, you can pick up whatever you just dropped.
I'm looking for my bank card. So there you go.
Oh, there it is. All right, but they will be back, and they will also be interacting with folks during the panel. So thanks again, folks. We'll see you in a bit. If I can. There you go. All right, so they're going to be coming up, and then after we kind of give our first impressions and we get the first take from our players in residence, this is actually I had a nice picture I needed to show of them in addition to having them on for real for us. But then after they give their first impressions, then it really heats up because we go through some of our industry friends and buddies and influencers and experts and independent analysts, and we're going to do some rapid rounds with 6 of the finest. You want to give them a little tour of who's going to be joining us?
Yeah, I mean, so first look at the top row, because they're kind of our front office experts in a manner of speaking. It's Marshall Lager, Dennis Pombriant, and Rebecca Wetterman, who many of you already know. And the idea is that these three will kind of the whole idea with the analyst panels are that we're not passing judgment on the companies. What we're doing is adding to the conversation, right? And that's really how to think about it. And these guys are all experts in covering kind of the CRM, CX, customer engagement universe, and it's absolutely incredible group and all three of them know each other well too. So great chemistry. On the bottom trio, we have Josh Greenbaugh, Kevin
Permenter,
Permenter.
It always gets me too. I want to say Parmenter so bad, but
Right,
it's
that's
Permenter.
exactly what I was about to say. Kevin Permenter and John Reed, who are all kind of the back office experts. I mean, look, ultimately, we all know now that CX is not just sales, marketing, and customer service. It's the entire customer experience end to end. So we wanted to break it up this way so that these three can talk to the impacts based on what they've heard from the others, talk to the impacts on CX and CE and CRM from the back office. And again, all three of them experts in their various fields. The only five of the six are independent, really, analysts. Kevin actually works with IDC. So you've got a really good group. And John, of course, is with Diginomica, but as an analyst is more or less an independent. So, this is.
Plus, he is the bad boy of VRP. You got it.
Yes, he is.
I mentioned you can just look at the look on his face in that picture. He's nothing but trouble, folks.
B-burp, the bad boy VRP. B-burp. B-burp.
All right. So I think we kind of set the stage for everything. So why don't we individually bring out the panelists? I think that's what is going to happen right now. That's right. Okay. So first off, and we're going to add them on one by one. We should have had some theme music or something for them to come out to, but I'm going to leave it to Mr. Greenberg to introduce Celia Fleischaker.
Wow. Hey, Celia.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Brent.
Hey.
So Celia, I've known Celia a while now. She was CMO at Pros, moved over recently to become CMO of Verint. She's a rock star CMO. I mean, the interesting thing with CMOs is you got to be able to kind of handle the back end, meaning the operational side. You got to be able to handle the front end, meaning the messaging, the actual marketing part, the outreach and so on. It's a rock star at both. And when a company needs operational, she'll take that on and just take care of it. When it needs on the front end, it needs kind of the messaging. She comes up with boundless customer experience, right? I mean, so you're starting to talk about. She's well suited, let's just say, to take Verint to the next level. So welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
He's so good at that.
I know.
That's why he's here. All right. So next up, I want to hear him go along on Lou, because literally he just met him about
right a minute, about half hour ago. Right. Well, okay. So hey, Lou. So the best way to think about it is that when we were first talking about him on a prior show, I actually called him, thinking I was saying Lou Orfanos. I actually called him Lou Albano, which was a wrestler, right? Whose nickname was the Captain, right? So this is Captain Lou Orfanos.
You gotta have the S on the end too. It's Orfanos, just to make it official.
And I learned quickly about him, since I literally met him like 15 minutes ago. But I did learn quickly. He has a hell of a sense of humor, right? So, right. And I will tell you something. When you're a GM and a VP of any company, especially one the size of HubSpot, that is not just a great thing to kind of have. You'd actually need it if you're going to succeed in doing it. So without even knowing that much, I know this guy's good because of the way he deals with people. So I'm going to leave it at that. And Brent, you said you wanted to hear me go long. I'm going long with the Captain.
There it is.
And Lou, by the way, came in through the ropes to get onto his seat.
That's right. I wish I had props. I wish I had more props.
All right, that was great. Shout out to HubSpot. They hit a major milestone recently with crossing the $1 billion annual revenue mark. So that's awesome. All right, next up. Oh,
wow, this is
a man who really doesn't need any introduction, but we're going to do that anyway. So,
well, I mean, he's not only the CTO, he's one of the leaders of the Pegasystems Layer Cakes, which is literally an award-winning rock band. Right?
I love Donnie's comment, by the way. Did you see Donnie's comment? That was great.
No.
He says we're getting real now with the WWF references. But, yeah.
Right. So Don is he's an interesting man in multiple ways. The band that he is part of actually did win the BYOB 2020 award as best band this year. right? Which is actually was not an easy thing to do. But more importantly, you have a visionary CTO, and that is not. Let's say the two phrases don't normally go together. This one it does, and as a result of that, it's why Pegasystems is. If you know anything about Pegasystems, you know that 7-8 years ago it was a BPM company, and it was basically dealing with the mechanics and processes and operations and business rules and engines. Now they're a visionary customer engagement company, and one of the reasons for that is this man's actual vision. Right. And please don't be modest and tell me it's the team. Right. It's this man's actual vision for the company. And it's really had a tremendous impact. So, hey again, Don, man, we see a lot.
Wow. And by the way, let me do a quick
thank you.
Let me do a quick shout out to Pega, because they also recently announced hitting the $1 billion annual revenue marks. See what happens when you sign up to come on and be on the Playaz?
It's all those companies right on that thoroughfare in Kendall Square, Cambridge, man. It's been a good year for Kendall Square, Cambridge.
No, we actually attributed to you showing up on the show. I mean, that's kind of really how we have to think about it. Or else, what's our purpose?
Good point. All right, let's keep it moving. Oh, we just spent some time with at the analyst event with Zoho with Vijay Sundaram. Hey, Vijay.
Hey, Vijay. Okay, so this guy's like, so again, first notice title, Chief Strategy Officer. And then think about Zoho. I mean, Zoho's gone and just celebrating their 25th anniversary. And Vijay hasn't been there the full 25, but he's an old timer. And now he's an old timer. He's actually somebody who has literally driven them from, let's say this, at one point in their earlier days, as good as they were so obscure that I literally thought that Raju, I won't go through the full thing, but Raju was the only employee of the company, right? I had no idea. It's the only person I ever met, and I've known them 20 years now, right? But thanks to Vijay, this company now has a high profile. It's moving like lightning. They've gone from a company focused on small business to a company that's well ensconced into the mid-market now. I mean, they've moved like lightning, and they have, I can say this, they have analyst community goodwill everywhere, and Vijay is one of the main drivers of all of that. So another incredible human being here. And of course, as always, a welcome addition to the panel.
And on top of all that, he's the one guy that we actually took pictures wearing cowboy hats with. So
yeah,
that will never ever happen again. So.
Exactly. That makes him the first and the last guy that will ever have occurred.
And only. All right, but last but certainly not least, Nick Tzitzon. And I always have to make sure I pronounce that thing right. It just makes me nervous saying it. But Nick Tzitzon is joining us. So let me bring him on. And it's amazing that StreamYard allows us to put all these folks on in that little slice of the screen. But Nick, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, there you are.
I'm concerned you didn't promote it enough on social media. I only got tagged like 400 times.
So let me tell you the story of this guy. So prior to being in ServiceNow, he was at SAP. And I didn't know him well at SAP. I know him well now, but I didn't know him well at SAP. But here was the fascinating thing about him. He was like this secret weapon. He was actually the secret head of all of SAP's marketing. I mean, everyone would think normally the CMO would be the head, but no, it was him. And he came up with when creativity showed up in SAP's marketing, typically because Nick pretty much put it there, right? It was just absolutely an astonishing accomplishment given the scope and scale of the company. And somehow he kept a publicly low profile. But then now coming over to ServiceNow, and came when Bill McNerney came to be CEO, he took the role of Chief Strategy Officer. And ServiceNow, with him at the strategy helm, is skyrocketing. I mean, it's just like skyrocketing. It's not even. I'll put it this way: it's where a few years ago people were paying attention to it. Now people are staring at it, right? So, it's literally that moving that quickly. And again, a large part of that, and again, please no team references here. A large part of that can be attributed to Nick, right? And he's been outstanding. And the other thing he's done, now that he's more public than he was at SAP, so to speak, he's got the goodwill of pretty much everybody who has spoken with him, because he's just generally a good person, right? And so, we've seen that also coming to the front. So, hi, Nick.
You're right. It's not the team. It's all me.
Good. Thank you.
All right. This is great. And one last thing we have to address, and I'm going to leave it to Paul. And it's the comment that Nick left really quite early on when we first put this together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, guys. So here's the problem you guys had. It's your fault. I was actually willing to do this. But remember with the requirement, so the deal was I was going to ship a bottle of bourbon or a spirit of wine bottle of choice, depending on what you drank, if all of you responded, and everyone had to respond within a deadline. It was out there, and if you weren't reading it, about it, all I can say is shame on you. Right? But I was going to send you each a bottle of whatever it was you were drinking, just based on this interesting little thing that I think Nick and Lou and Don and started talking about. And I didn't hear from some of you. I won't say who, more than one, but I won't say who in time. So either I'm in luck, meaning I don't have to actually go do it, or you're out of luck. Depends on how you view it, right? So sorry, guys. On the other hand, I may still do it, but we'll see.
It's going to be a thirsty show, in other words, but we'll get through it.
That's disappointing.
Feel is like, and that's why I came. I came for the bourbon.
I thought that was what was happening.
Trying to have a bourbon tasting.
Okay, this has been great, but let's start digging in a little bit. And by the way, there's a great conversation in the comment section if you're interested in blueberry bagels and Popeye's chicken. Two of my favorites, by the way, but
that is not going to happen.
All right, no, we're not going to talk about that. So let's talk in a little bit, and why don't each of you, and I'll kind of cue each of you to do this, but we're about a year into living life in the pandemic, and I would love to get from each of you just a minute or two of your perspective on how this last year is, impacted you personally, but also look at what's going on in the industry. How's the industry responded to the challenge that COVID has had, particularly from your customers' perspectives? Celia, I'll start with you first.
Sure. Just in a personal front, I'll just say my family, we've been really fortunate in terms of how it's impacted us, and it hasn't, it's been a different way of living, but from a health perspective, we've been really lucky, and it's surreal. I'll say that. I remember when it first started, and was still traveling for work, and just as we walked into an airport, we were in Europe, and literally the terminal was empty, and we were like, wow, I guess this is real and it's happening. And who would have known it would have been a year and we're still in it. I think from an industry perspective, I think it's put CX and customer engagement at the forefront in a lot of ways, because I think it really put stress on and put the focus and the importance on how you engage with customers. I think in the link between customer engagement and the success of a business is very strong now. Not that it wasn't important before, but I think this pandemic just really put it in focus that you had to be able to communicate and switch gears, right, in a different way. And Verint in particular, as I'm sure a lot of the companies that are on the panel today, our customers were impacted so fast, and dealing, I think the big switch for a lot of them was the work from home aspect. When you send all your agents home over, and then that coupled with a shift to self-service, it made for a crazy year. But I think it accelerated a lot of things that were already starting to happen, and it's it's provided a lot of, while it isn't the way I would have wanted it to happen, there's a lot of opportunity here to really improve how we engage and how we move forward based on what we've learned.
Hey, Nick, you want to pick up from that?
I mean, I can only agree with what Celia said. I mean, look, the year was a dumpster fire. I mean, you know, like everybody, we're all like sick and tired of this. No offense, guys. I mean, I love you guys, but like, you know, it tends to blend in with the rest of the like video meetings we all have. So like, we're all sick of that same stuff. I think that's fair to say. I agree with Celia, by the way. Like, my family was likewise blessed, you know, God willing. No one seriously ill. I think as people, you know, have reverted to this remote environment, like people are increasingly also clarifying how hard it is for them to get basic things done that are supposed to be contributing to serving customers of the business better. So I do think it has shown a pretty bright spotlight on the extent to which a lot of businesses, frankly, in tech and other industries, were getting by perhaps with a far less than ideal value chain to serve customers. So that's inherently good for this conversation.
Vijay, why don't you jump in there?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk a little bit about how we've seen the experiences of our customers, and maybe that'll help us understand what might have happened in the macro. Customers had to change many of their processes. They had to, things that, for any number of reasons, working from home is part of it, managing an exigency is another part of it, and so on. So they had to change their processes. So as a vendor, as a supplier, it was incumbent upon us to re-examine some of the things that we were providing to these customers and seeing how they could themselves adapt to the new processes and the new things that they needed to keep in place, because business, as we all know, wasn't as usual. Another thing that was probably a little bit more behavioral was how decisions get made, right? So lots of people are working from away. Things are disconnected. We don't have meetings and where we can get together or coalesce like we used to before. So decision-making got much more decentralized. As a company, we already do that, but we saw customers doing that. So once again, you need the tools and the information to facilitate that kind of a model, because sometimes you simply don't have the time to convene. You have to react to things from where you are with the wherewithal that you have and the tools that you have. So that was another piece that we saw from our customers as a consequence of this pandemic that fed back into what we need to do in product and technology.
Lou.
Sure. I guess personally, we've had an okay year. I have two very little kids, and so they're always home, and they're often running around just right above me. And I've turned my bar, which is absently, like noticeably missing some bourbon this time around, into a home office. So, you know, it's been different and interesting. On the customer front, you know, we had this notion of experience disruption, and what we meant by that was the way that you sell is more and more now how you win, right? And so you look back at a bunch of the leaders and the innovators in the last 15, 20 years, and they're all disrupting experiences, whether it's DoorDash or Netflix or whatever it might be. And then this last year happened, and it's really interesting that sort of everything just got disrupted, and everybody had to become an experience disruptor in some ways. And the thing I'm most curious about is, what are the pieces of the new world that are going to be sort of bridged with the old world? You know, like, I think it's amazing that I can order dinner from the nicest restaurant in town and just have it delivered, but that doesn't mean we don't want to go on a date or go out to dinner again. So like, it's the blending of sort of the new things that got fast forwarded with the old that I think are going to be most interesting. Everybody's had to change. It's been pretty fascinating to watch from my standpoint.
Last but certainly not least, Don.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree with Nick on the dumpster fire aspect of everything. And I personally, and I see this in my kids too, like just craving normal social interactions with people, not through like a screen, which I love all of you, but like just being in a room with coworkers, with friends, and having those normal engagements. I think I'm personally really anxious to get back to. I think from a technology perspective, a lot of what I saw in our clients was the sort of all the concepts and buzz speak around digital transformation suddenly made real. Like, oh, right, we do have to be adaptable. Oh, we do have to move fast. Oh, we do have to respond quickly to our customers' needs. Oh, we do have to make this ridiculously easy for our employees to do, whether they're distributed at home or whether it's our customers coming in over a web channel. Like one of our customers, the CIO of a big media company, he made the comment that he has spent years talking to his company about Agile and trying to get people to understand what that really means. And once COVID hit, it was like, boom, we're all Agile now. We have no choice but to respond and move quickly. So, as Lou said, I hope to see some of that embrace of agility, that embrace of what Vijay was talking about, a sort of distributed decision-making, even carry forward as we move into the after time. Because I think it's actually how we can build back businesses that are stronger than they were before.
Well, so let me follow that with something. I have to make a comment to Lou. So Lou, what I understand is you literally, because you didn't get a bottle of bourbon, you converted your bar into a home office.
Yeah, that was the order of operations. Yes.
That's what I thought. Wow. If you had told me, I would have sent you one. But so here's the question. So we've all obviously noted the dramatic changes in how we respond to customers, how customers respond to their customers, and so on and so forth. And that, of course, has created a big kind of discussion, at least, if not actual action, around empathy. All right. And empathy is kind of the buzzword. At the same time, it's legitimately being, let's say, thought through and figured out. But, there's always this argument that, well, you can't force empathy. You can't impose empathy, right? On the one hand, you have individuals who are personally empathetic. On the other hand, a business empathy is actually, while it needs those individuals, it's not exactly the same thing either, right? So how do you guys and I'd love to hear this from everybody here. So how do each of you think about empathy generally? And then how do you actually do that with your companies? What's your company actually doing to actually provide that kind of empathetic outlook to the people that they interact with?
Well, so I think empathy first and foremost just starts in every single interaction, right? And the definition of trying to understand somebody else's perspective and put that in your brain as you converse with them and listen to them. It's a improviser trick that we've been using for years and years. I think from a corporate level at Pega, it's really forced us as managers and leaders to think really deeply about what all of our team members are going through, how we best need to support them, how we give people space. And, the one neat thing about this Zoom kind of world that we're in is it's like getting this little keyhole windows into people's full lives where you see their dogs and their kids and their spouses and partners behind them. And I think it's been a great reminder to me of the sort of lives that sit behind our work life and to carry that with you into the conversations. As far as our clients go, we're lucky to work with some great organizations like Commonwealth Bank of Australia that does real-time customer engagement. And one of the things that they were able to do really quickly in 2020 was pivot all of their engagement conversations to not be about what can we sell you, but to be about how can we help? Can we provide emergency services? Can we provide loan deferments? And that ability of a brand to use their values in combination with their technology to respond immediately to their customers' needs. I think that's the kind of empathy that happens when you talk about empathy at a business or at a brand level.
Well, actually, Don, let me ask you a little follow-up on that, because you actually have a product that uses the word empathy, empathetic AI.
Yeah.
Oh, AI. So what does that even, how does that even work? I mean, how does something like that work?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that there's, acknowledging the fact that there's a little bit of marketing buzz on the name there, right? But because AI in and of itself isn't empathetic, right? The humans who use AI as a tool to interact with their customer should have empathy. And what we can provide to those humans are the tools and the views to understand that if your AI is primarily trying to sell people stuff, it's probably not particularly empathetic. It's probably weighted on how, as a business, make more money off this customer. If your AI is balancing that with how do I provide services that the customer needs? How do I streamline experiences for them? How do I comfort them when they have an emergency or a consideration they need to take care of? Right? That's an AI that's operating in an empathetic way. And I think so much of our use of AI, especially in customer engagement, is about balancing that. How do we respond to the customer's needs, but finding that middle portion where we can also do it in a way that's profitable for the business that's trying to grow these customer relationships.
Okay. Who else would like to pick it up?
Yeah, I could. Vijay, you want to go?
Okay, sure. With respect to working with customers, again, this goes back to the issue of decision making and empowering people. One of the things that we put in place during this time is to allow people at every level in the organization to make customer decisions. Like, for example, a customer is struggling and needs some redemption on whatever, on payment terms or waivers, whatever it is, right? Make those decisions. This isn't a time to collect everything and get as much as you can, right? So again, it goes back to a notion of a cultural aspect of it, where you establish very early in a situation like this, and hopefully this behavior continues beyond a pandemic, that this is what matters. It's about, if you're in business for the long term, this is what you care about, and you don't have to request to be empathetic. Use your human nature to do that and make those decisions. So that's another aspect of something that came out very clearly during this last year.
Well, actually, another thing for you too is one of the things with Zoho has always been this strong service first, meaning human service, not customer service, human service first, serve the world, which obviously if you have that perspective, empathy is going to be part of how you view your culture. And I think the point you're making on culture, if you could elaborate a little bit on that, I think it would be important.
Yeah, back to me.
Yeah.
It's, our CEO always talks about what persists over time. The capital that persists over time is your culture, because that transcends you. It hopefully transcends generations. And when we recruit people and they work with us at the early stage, this is part of what you look at. How do you put in place a culture where people understand how they treat each other? Who do you put first? So, for example, it's very clear in the company that the employees are first. You ask any employee and they will tell you that. That's part of that innate culture. And that culture, some of the things in that culture then translate to the people you work with. So it could be your customers, it could be your partners, it could be your ecosystem. And then you get into individuals understand how they need to work or how they need to operate in a given construct. Once again, it breaks down that system of command and control where someone has to tell you what to do, because your culture drives you forward into deciding what decision to make with a particular customer, with a fellow employee, or with somebody in your ecosystem.
Okay, thanks.
I think the culture is really, that whole aspect is interesting, because I think the move home and 100% decentralized for so many companies really tested corporate cultures and how you took care of employees, the interactions that you had. I like what Don said about, you did get this window into people's personal lives that you wouldn't have had necessarily before. But I think a lot of companies had to not restructure, but it was a test of how their culture manifested itself in communications and with their employees. That was interesting to watch and experience at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're going to be a company that wants to walk the walk on things like diversity, inclusion, belonging, empathy is sort of a cornerstone of that. And people aren't going to feel like they belong. It's like it's a place where they want to build, like a place where they want to build so their grandkids are proud of. If they don't feel like there's empathy being given to them, those around them, and even customers. So I don't know, that's been a big pillar for us. I think it's critical for culture, a really important point.
All right. Nick?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that, and I agree with what everybody said, I think the one thing you can't forget about the last 12 months is how much has happened beyond just the pandemic. So, you have this, in the case of everybody's on this call's culture, you have all these different people from all these different backgrounds, in our case, certainly, people around the world, and they're all looking at and trying to process everything that's happening in the world at the same time. They can't get away from their kids in the next room or in the same room doing, Zoom schooling. So how do you create an environment where it's safe for people to just sort of be vulnerable, to be okay with the fact that this is hard, to give people the permission to talk about their mental health, beyond just talking to them about what we're doing as a business and how we're serving our customers, which of course remains, sort of the reason we're all together in a company. But the more you can make people feel safe and allow them to be vulnerable, I feel like the more effective and the more fierce they'll be in executing the company strategy.
So one final thing to you, Nick. So ServiceNow, if you're looking at, let's say history, has always been focused on the ops side of things, which, if you're viewing it from a very, let's say, a purely linear point, empathy and that don't necessarily seem to be related, particularly because one is relatively, let's say it's mechanics, and the other one is, deep, kind of human emotional response to others. And but on the other hand, ServiceNow has been not only a champion of actually promotion of empathy, but become an empathetic company. And how does that work? I mean, because it's coming from a very different place than anybody else I know, and pushing forward on that very question.
Well, I think, Paul, there's a difference between the company, in its founding vision, right? If you went back and you asked Fred Luddy, why did you start ServiceNow? Why did you build this platform? He would tell you exactly where you see us today. He would say, I started it because I want to democratize technology and business. I want to make it easy for people to build things and to work better together and to serve customers and serve colleagues. Companies that go public, they go through a journey where they find markets to apply the vision. And so we did that, and we, found a great market in IT and IT service and IT operations. But we're sort of to the point now in an evolutionary sense where you can almost get back to why the company was started in the first place. And this notion of workflow, which we talk about all the time, sometimes till we're, blue in the face, it's like you have to find ways for people to be able to action things and work together to address them. And if you can do that, then you can really enable the great promise of other people's businesses and help other people's businesses be what they originally dreamed them to be. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I love this because I think I'm going to dovetail into something that is part of the empathy equation, but maybe it hasn't really been talked about it like this. Let's talk about customer data privacy and the role that plays in customer experience. And I would love to get each of your perspective on what's going on with Apple and Facebook. You have the iOS update that is meant to pretty much protect customers or give consumers more of a power over how their data is being used. And then kind of the Facebook stance on that is, well, you're going to be hurting a lot of small businesses who would have no other kind of cost-effective way to be able to connect with potential customers than to leverage that kind of information. I would love to hear each of your opinion on where we are within that kind of one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum with customer data privacy. And whoever wants to jump in, jump right in.
Well, I'll go ahead and start with a word that we often put together with empathy, and that's transparency. I think if you look at a lot of what Apple is talking about, if you look at what things like some of the regulations around GDPR and CCPA that have been all about consumer data privacy, core to all of them is this idea of transparency, that I as a consumer have a right to understand how my data is being used. I have a right to ask you not to use that data. And with AI, that feeds into this idea of explainability. If I'm using data to make decisions, I have to be able to explain how those decisions are being made. I have to be able to explain that from a purposes of doing things like ethical bias checking to make sure my algorithms aren't operating against some bias that I didn't even perhaps see. I have to do that for regulatory reasons, and hopefully I have to do that because as a brand, I feel like it's my responsibility to my clients to do. So I think one of the first things that we need to think about as we use data to drive better customer experiences, because I think done right, data can actually help us drive better experiences, for customers is to keep that idea of transparency first and foremost in how we use the data and how we explain the use of the data.
I think transparency and consent are two super interesting things for me. This nugget I picked up on the Facebook piece is that if you aren't paying, you are not the customer, right? And so you're actually the product in that sense. And so that's just an interesting way to think about it. But I do think the other part of this is consent, and that's going to change the way that we think about customer experience. Everybody's been talking about one-to-one personalization at scale for so long, and almost without regard for that sort of consent side of it. So what I think is really interesting is, like, I'm spending a lot of time right now thinking, what's like a salesperson and a buyer relationship going to look like in the future? And you kind of have to take all the cold stuff out of the equation completely. And I think that's really interesting. Even when you boil it down to those use cases where consent's a factor, privacy is a factor, it changes the way we all need to build. It changes the way the jobs are going to be playing out. So all that's super fascinating to me.
I'll go next. On the issue of privacy, this has been a topic that has been unregulated for far too long, right? And so when the regulation comes in, like GDPR and so on, companies scramble to keep up or to be just behind the regulation. What companies need to do is to be ahead of it. They have to know where their stance is, how do they value and see their customer data, what are their views on privacy. That's the first thing. The second thing I feel companies should do is they need to go that extra mile. They need to go the extra mile and anticipate things that regulation will come up with. I'll give you an example. You have third-party cookies on your websites. You can shut that down. It's within your prerogative to do that. You will forfeit something, but nonetheless, it is your choice. In the absence of the appropriate regulatory measures, one thing to look at is to look if there's a fundamental conflict in the business model and what the company does. So if the company's purpose is in generating, is in building advertising revenue, it is going to be at cross purposes with other things that they do. Clearly, that's the case with a company like Facebook. And so on that particular topic, as a consumer, I would certainly stand by the stance of Apple. Now, if the business is at cross purposes with what else it does, then there's a fundamental conflict. And many of the larger companies have that conflict. And so they're always going to be under suspicion. So you've got to keep your nose clean and keep your business separate from anything that gains you advantage by breaking privacy.
Celia, you wanted to jump in, or?
Yeah, I think the trust factor and how you build those relationships with your customers over the long term, and what Don said about transparency and the consent side of things, it all goes to building trust in that long-term relationship with your customer and strengthening that. And I think people do have to. I love the idea of going beyond the regulation and what is right for the customer and taking those additional steps. I think it's important, and I think customer data is you have to treat it. It's so important, and it can help a company do so many things from a personalization standpoint, but it has to be done transparently and to build trust.
Mm-hmm. If I could just respond to Jay said. Sorry, go ahead, Nick. Sorry, you hadn't had a chance to answer this one, so go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just gonna, you mentioned the sort of idea of regulation and staying ahead of it, and I think that sometimes we need to. This is going to seem weird. Almost take a lead from the motion picture industry, right? And the reason the Motion Picture Rating Association existed is because the motion picture agents realized that either they need to figure out how to regulate themselves, or the government was going to do it for them. And we did a survey towards the end of last year of private sector technology leaders, and 75% of them expected that AI usage, data usage would be government regulated in 3 years, which I find personally actually kind of depressing. I would love for the technology sector not to depend on the government to set down the laws, but for us as an industry to get to some agreement of what we think the right usage of data is and what is in the best interest of how we can respect the privacy and the interest of our consumers and do that ourselves, so that we're not doing this because it's the law, but because it's actually the right thing to do.
I love that.
Yeah, I agree, Don. I agree with that point. There's a blueberry bagel lover in the chat function. He can self-identify if he chooses to, but he always says to me in his work on this that a free customer is more valuable than a captive customer. So in my view, what businesses have to do is make it so clear to people why the use of their data will actually improve their life. And, we have to find a way to help businesses do that without making it seem like it's a legal disclaimer statement where you're like, gosh, I'm not even sure what any of this says. And if people have the clarity on what you propose to do with the data and how it's going to make their experience better, then I think, I don't have any data behind it, but I suspect people will opt in. If it's not clear to them, or if worse, they feel like it's going to be used to bombard them and to somehow impede their quality of life, then they won't opt in. So, I think empowering people to make informed choices is always inherently good for businesses to do.
Yeah, that we could go on and on for days on this one topic, but we do have a little bit of a special spin on this, so I'm going to turn it over to the venerable Paul Greenberg.
Oh God, venerable now. That just means old, right? So I'm venerable. I have to leave the show. I'm sorry. So we actually, as you know, the CRM Playaz runs a weekly happy hour, and we call it this year's the happier hour. And so the concept is 15, 20 people get on. We sort of blab, mix. A lot of the people you see commenting now have been on many happy hours before. So yesterday, we gave them the opportunity for one of them to come up with a question that they would come on the show and ask you about. Again, not a take it to your head with a surprise bat kind of question, just a question, right? Right. So the person whose question we chose, Catherine Bonesteel, who is, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before she gets to ask the question, because there's something very notable. I've known her, well, more than a decade. And when I met her, she was let's say a young AR person. She was in analyst relations. I'm not going to go through the whole story because that would take up a while, but I actually ran across her again. We stayed on and off touch over the years, but I actually ran across her again after a pretty long hiatus when I was doing a whole piece on we must all have good news, right? And I was looking around for good news on COVID and things like that, and I saw this clip in Houston TV about this person, Catherine Bonesteel, who was running this company, nix COVID, and they were going around distributing PPEs to not just the frontline hospital workers, but like to the police, to fire, to pharmacy workers, and so on. And I said, well, there can't be two actual Catherine Bonesteels. It has to be the same one, right? So, and it was. And since then, of course, we've been back in touch. And I want, Catherine, just tell everybody one thing and then ask your question, which is how many PPEs your little company, meaning not that many people are involved in it, have managed to actually both source and then also distribute?
It's now 7.8 billion pieces of PPE and COVID-19 tests.
Oh my God.
You're
Right.
getting,
Amazing.
Thank you. Well, thanks for letting me hop on and ask my question. I wanted to ask you all what advice you had for leadership teams who are still facing challenges transitioning from an in-office environment to a virtual workforce, kind of focusing on employee engagement, which we talked about a little bit.
I can go first if you'd like. Yep. And I would say trust your people more. I mean, trust that you don't have to actually act as a leader in many cases and people figure out how to do the right thing. that goes a long way. And that goes back to the point I made earlier about distributed decision making. Allow people to have some leeway in what they do. Allow them to make mistakes, maybe a second time, maybe even the third time. And then things might actually sort themselves out better than what you might actually have been able to plan and execute.
I'm going to steal something that I learned from a new member of Pega's leadership team, Hayden Stafford, which is just sort of 3 principles of leadership, which I think are especially true in this distributed world. The first is clarity. Making sure you have absolute clarity on what the goal of the organization is, what goals the organization is trying to achieve, what the different roles people play in achieving those goals. The second is empowerment, making sure that people feel, to Vijay's point, trusted, empowered to go use their best judgment to drive those goals. And then backing that up with accountability, making sure that we understand what we are accountable to be doing, because I think that idea of trust and empowerment and accountability go hand in hand. And then I'd finally just add to continue to remember, the empathetic stuff. Nick mentioned, we are all trying to educate our kids, feed our pets, make sure that our parents get their COVID vaccine when they become eligible, etc. And allow people to have that personal life and realize that the traditional 9-to-5 workday as we know it probably isn't how we're going to operate anymore.
I would just add one thing here is just try to model the behavior that you want to normalize and be okay, right? There's a lot of leaders at HubSpot that never were on Slack before this, and suddenly they're there all day, every day, and they're modeling the behavior that they can be available in a different way. One of the things I talk about my kids and the time off I'm taking all the time and try to make that as normal as possible. A lot of it has to do with trust, but you just want to make it okay and give sort of the comfort that folks can do that. So I do think it's important to think about modeling the behavior, try new things. I send a lot of Loom videos out to provide context for people because you're not getting the hallway chat anymore, right? So you got to fill the gaps that are being created and model behavior. I think those are really sort of important principles to think about.
I think that modeling behavior is especially important because I think employees, they are expected to work, or they are working longer hours because I have a lot of people on the team that are young moms or young parents, and they are having to help their kids with school during the day, and they're trying to get online at 10 o'clock at night and finish what they need to do, and being really clear that it's not always expected, and keep yourself, send your emails, set them to send to 8 the next morning. You don't want to. I just don't think you need to model and show them that it's okay to log off and to step back from it and to have that personal life and keep it separate, because it is so easy to get trapped into just being online and available and accessible all the time. And I think leaders need to show that isn't what's required in order to be successful and get that job done necessarily.
Yeah. Catherine, first of all, wow. On your amazing achievement. Frankly, I think we would all willingly give you the rest of the floor to explain how you did it, but maybe for another time. I'd give you 3. They're very similar to what the rest of the team here has said. Number 1, I would say, listen. We sometimes, I think, fall into the habit as leadership teams of constantly communicating and constantly showing and telling, and you don't actually know what people feel unless you ask and shut up. So definitely listen as much as possible. 2, on the sense of role modeling, I'd go a step further and say protect people, because we now know what happens, right? People fill the schedule end to end, back to back, and then by Tuesday or Wednesday, people are burned out. So as a leadership team, how can you stop that from happening? How can you actively get in the way of what is almost certain to be a snowball rolling down a mountain in terms of virtual office behavior? And then I'll steal one from our CEO, Bill McDermott, who is like a soundbite machine. And he says, optimism is the only free stimulus in the world. And I sometimes, as a bit of a cynic, forget to tell my teams that everything is going to be okay and that we got a bright future, not just as a company, not just as a world, everybody, right? There'll be a better day ahead. And constantly infusing positive energy, I think, makes it okay for people at a time where they need reassurance.
Right. Well, thank you.
Thanks to
Catherine.
Catherine.
Wow,
Yeah,
really great
absolutely.
advice, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
And we
I'll see
we
you.
still
you.
can still get some advice from her, because 7.8 billion.
I know.
That's
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's
Wow.
straight.
Wow.
That's nuts.
Uh,
And let me give us. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
No, all I was gonna say is go online, type in KHOU Houston, and her name, and then you'll see a YouTube video clip. It was the first one I saw in the beginning, and it's gone well beyond that since then.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember the first billion, but now it's like. I got to do a special shout out to one of the panelists here. My man Don
I
is
know.
not only answering, on screen here, he's doing like text comments. I am fully expecting you to break out the guitar, which I know there's a guitar somewhere in that room.
There's a guitar and a theremin back there, but you don't want me to break out the theremin. Trust me.
It's too early in the day for that, man. Hold off on that for a while. All right, so let's talk a little bit about platforms and integration in back office and front office, and how has the pandemic changed the relationship between the back office in terms of customer experience? We always, you look at Amazon, and it's not just about, they got a lot of products. Now it's about, well, they stand a chance of getting that product to you when they say they will, because now they have their own shipping. So they have their whole vertical and horizontal ecosystem. Well, can you guys talk about the importance of knocking down the silos? Silos aren't for selling subscriptions. Platforms are. And maybe talk about how the evolution within this pandemic has changed the relationship between the back office and the front office. Whoever wants to take it.
I will start. I guess is the either you have the BPM guy or the workflow guy start talking. But look, as a company, as Paul more eloquent than me described it, came from the BPM space. We've spent lots of time working with our clients around the fact that the processes in your back office are how you fulfill the promises that you make in the front office. And I think the pandemic, more than anything, has just kind of rubbed raw the view into those processes. And if those processes aren't good, right, you feel it. And you especially feel it when you don't have a whole bunch of contact center agents in one room trying to solve problems when they're distributed, or you're trying to make all these experiences self-service for your clients because the volumes are just increasing so much. You've got to have automation in those processes that connect front to back if you actually want to be able to get the things done that your clients want to get done.
Yeah, I would endorse Don's framing perfectly. I don't think it's changed. I mean, companies, I think, put up artificial boundaries over time for no good reason. If you're a company that employs 100 people or 1,000 people, why would you willingly suggest that 700, 600, 500 weren't directly related to serving your paying customers? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So to me, it's about what is the work that inherently connects people to serving customers. Focus on giving them ways to build that work into a seamless collaboration, and then let them be effective there. And then, to the extent that they're doing other kinds of work that you can't claim is differentiating for your company because it doesn't actually help anybody, doesn't serve a customer, it doesn't help a colleague, that's where you figure out a way to automate it. So I think that's been constant, and I'm likewise with Don happy that this is clarified what should have been a long-standing understanding.
I'd go on to say that some of these definitions, front office, back office, perhaps it was the artifact of software vendors themselves, because they occupied that space first, and so they defined it and gave it this name, and that's now propagated to the world. People are in business to conduct business, and that means managing their books. That means serving their customers. That means working with their employees. All of that, right? So they see that whole thing as a unified whole. And I think it's a technology that's put that into buckets, because I don't think a business person really thinks about it that way. They're running their business. So the first fix on this has been, or at least the first generation of fixes, has been to integrate these, bring this information together. I can see my invoice when I'm sitting in my CRM, et cetera, et cetera. Bring the stuff contextually when you need it, when you're solving that job. That itself is a big ask. Companies like us and others have done a pretty good job of that. I think the next step is perhaps what Don was talking about here too. That is, it is to do with orchestrating everything around the work itself. So define the work process, what people get done in their work, and then the applications fit right in, whether they're front office or back office, to execute that overall plan. And that's, I think, where a lot of this technology will go.
Any more takers?
I think the last thing to round out there is the silo between front office and back office is sort of the next phase. It seems like we spent a lot of time with the marketing and sales thing over the last 20 years, and then sales and service, and then maybe some service and marketing connection. But the front office to back office, as I've been talking to customers, that's where the biggest Franken system exists right now. It's combinations of consultants and custom code and multiple platforms. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to bring that together. The best place to think about that is the buying experience for a buyer. How can you pull a lot of that forward? And again, think about the work as a few of you mentioned. So if you think about the ideal sale, should you have to go through the back office hoops, or should the customer be exposed to that? Probably not. So it feels like a pretty big frontier to be focused on. I think a lot of us are probably thinking in that same way now.
So
yeah, I love the comment in the chat from Josh Greenbaum. It just talks about, like, if your transformation is entirely focused on the front office and you don't fix your back office, you actually don't transform anything. The only thing you do is connect your customers to crappy experiences faster. That's all you've done, right? So they have to go hand in hand. And the clients that we've worked with that have been really smart about this, I think about organizations like Lloyd's Bank, that have realized that they actually have to fix their internal processes that follow on from that onboarding experience or that servicing experience before they even think about the digital front end, because they need a good process to wrap a digital front end around, not the other way.
Yeah, it's a massive project, right? It's the whole company that has to change in order to really make customer engagement work. It's no longer a marketing or whatever problem. It's across the board.
I mean,
I remember.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. It's your show.
Your show. Your show.
All right. I was going to say, I remember back in Ritz-Carlton back in the day, in the glory days of Ritz-Carlton, they had like a provision that any person who worked in a Ritz-Carlton hotel, it didn't matter what job you had, could authorize a certain amount in order to improve a customer's experience. So you could write off someone's room service meal, you could comp somebody a night if you found that they were unsatisfied. And to me, that's like perfection, right? Where everybody feels empowered that they have a role to play and make customer experience great. And how can businesses think culturally, in terms of cultural transformation, where everybody's going to have equal ownership in what paying customers feel?
Fair enough. Well, the one thing I will just sort of ask is sort of a closing on this one. And this is, obviously the thing that's pointed up, ultimately we're looking at an impact on human behavior is what we're looking at. That's what all this does, right? It's an impact on employee behavior, impact on customer behavior, but it's an impact on a person's behavior and how they respond to it. And the thing that pointed it up the most was when the supply chain got stretched during the pandemic, right? So, the thing with the supply chain, which has always been interesting, is that it's a real easy one to frustrate or for a customer to be frustrated by, relatively happy about, or modestly indifferent, but at least pleased enough that their product or service, the product got to them in a timely way, because there's an actual date and time attached to it that you're measuring against immediately. And it points it up when supply chains stretch and, human behavior is changing anyway due to a pandemic, that, the back office is not really a back office. It's how a company operates with its customers, employees, that are going to drive the success or failure of that company in the long run. And I think all of you have answered that. The one thing I would like to, well, actually, we'll save this for the next round. I'll ask it in that, okay? But I want you to keep that framework in mind for a minute, all right? And then when we get to the next round, we'll get to it.
Well, we're about into the last round. Well, we got a little ways to go, but we want to make sure we're mindful of your time, because you guys are very important folks, and we're just glad to get your time right now. So let's do a little rapid round stuff. Let's talk about the role of industries going forward. Everybody has been focused. There's been a ton of announcements over the last 6 to 12 months around industries. It seems to be capturing a lot of attention in the industry. What's the role of industries moving forward as we move out of the pandemic?
Okay. Hugely important.
And that was the sound of silence by Simon and Garfunkel.
Accompanied on the theremin. Hugely important. We talked about processes, right, as being essential to customer experience. Processes are industry specific. A bank has different processes than an insurance company, than a telecommunications company, than a manufacturer, et cetera, and then a government. And even as you think about platforms, right? Because I think every technology company is to some degree, either in reality or in marketing, becoming a platform company. You can't solve those process problems without some pretty deep understanding of the industry processes themselves.
Okay.
I'd go back to the point we were talking about before, where certainly there will be things that aren't differentiating, where you have an interest in your given industry to know what is the best in class way to do this thing. My caution, and I'm sure we would all share it, is that not to get trapped in too much standard thinking, and to find the right balance, right? Increasingly, companies need to look to businesses that they aren't even in today for 25% of their revenue in the next, several years. So it's a question about how you balance finding industry domain specific standard practice and figuring out where you have to innovate in order to sort of break through the paradigms of the industry that you're in.
All right.
This is a super good point, Nick. I think the balance there is standardization versus special snowflake syndrome, which can happen a lot of times. And I don't know if it's that some of the industry has done a little bit of a disservice where maybe we haven't drawn the platform lines quite the right way in terms of this is how far an industry specific offering should go, or maybe this amount of sort of data architecture will help you scale, and then we'll build the industry specific stuff on top. I think it's a little bit different here and there, but I maybe just be talking as a company that's sort of coming from the SMB up, and we're finding ways to apply a lot more of the standardization and then hearing the customization industry asks from customers. So we're kind of at a different angle at it than you all are. But that seems to be the conversation I'm having a lot nowadays about industry.
All right, we can move on to the next one. So this goes to remember what I said about the framework. So we're looking at a back office, a so-called back office. Basically, we're looking at activities that a company has and the people of that company and how it impacts the customers externally, and also the prospects, and also just constituents who may never become customers or prospects. So it's a wide range. So obviously, one of the big things we see a long discussion going on now is employee engagement, right? And Marshall, I think, brought it up in one of his comments about employee engagement and customer engagement. And, you always hear the old saw, happy employee equals happy customer, right? That isn't absolutely true, but it's, it's close enough. So in your company, each of your company's case, since you all do understand, but all of you are clearly, empathetic companies, and say on the one hand, and at the same time understand that it's the totality of your company that's impacting your future and potential constituents. What are you doing around employee engagement? Each of you. Anyone start? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll pick. Celia, you start.
Sure. Just as personally at Verint, what we're doing.
Yeah.
Is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of communication front and center, and trying to ratchet that up a lot more than maybe we even have in the past. And this is, Paul, I joined during the pandemic, right? So it's been 6 months. So it's been an interesting onboarding process and getting to know the culture and getting engaged and plugged in through this environment has been really different. But I think that as a team, definitely looking to communicate more and effectively, to be empathetic with our employees. And I think enablement too has been a big push for us, because not just about engaging and culturally as you might think, but the more enabled employees feel, the more that ownership that they feel, they're able to contribute more. And so we've focused a lot on enablement across the board.
Okay. Who's next?
I'll go.
Okay, Vijay.
So yeah, one of the elements of engagement that we've focused on as part of a culture is to remove boundaries around work. So people don't come into prescribed jobs or jobs matched up with their titles or qualifications. So somebody like, for example, we are growing regionally in a number of areas. That's part of our strategy all across the world. So some people want to get involved in that process of building an organization, hiring people, finding people in remote places, things like that. So part of that engagement is actually to allow employees to go outside the scope and roles that they've traditionally been working on. So it keeps them literally engaged. It keeps them motivated. It brings new ideas. It allows people to, once again, allow the company to organically develop, because people are swapping across roles. You'll be surprised how many people come from a background in engineering, and all of a sudden they're actually really good at program management, or they're really good at design. And if you take out those boundaries, you engage those people and you uncover that talent.
Vijay, I love that comment, and this concept of job fluidity, of being both comfortable but also energized by a job that is kind of constantly changing and moving based on your interests and the company's needs. I think we're going to see more and more of that, frankly, than more structured processes. The other thing that we've been spending a lot of time on is thinking about and really activating around inclusion and diversity. I think one of the other things that's really important is making all employees feel included in the conversation, making sure that all employees have safe spaces to interact, that all views are represented. I think, it's especially important as we moved into this virtual world to do simple things like make sure that everybody on a Zoom screen is offered the chance to speak at one time or another, right? So that kind of focus on inclusion and diversity. And then, we're also engaging our employees by doing things like winning rock band concerts. We find
by the way, Don, one of your co-panelists there actually posed a question about whether you're going to play the guitar or not. I'm just throwing that out there.
We'll see how we end up at the end of the day.
Okay, well, while we're seeing how we end up at the end of the day, we do have, I want to make sure. Yeah, she looks ready. It is Play in Residence, Elle Nicole France. Elle Nicole has the next question. Take it away.
Thanks, guys. And I want to say I still haven't found that new bank card that I was looking for, but I gave it. So here's one for all of you guys, because we've been talking a lot about this larger scale of transformation and kind of trying to match large scale visions for how companies need to operate differently, but human scale operations too. And I'm curious, because each of you as businesses come at this from a very different perspective, but what are your takes on the right sort of scale of, I'm going to call it a component? How should we be tackling in a practical way these transformation challenges so that we get the benefit of making progress that we can see, that we can measure, and that is actually delivering business benefits, but isn't so big and so indigestible that we have the same old problems that we used to have with great big, kind of big bang technology implementations? So how do we break this down into the scale of problem that we can actually tackle in a meaningful way, that we don't have to wait, 2 years to see results? Just a little.
Yeah, yeah. I guess just to start, I would say your entrance there was disappointing compared to your entrance earlier in the show. but that's for another day. Nicole, it's a great question. I would say, in our view, in our worldview, right, we think we need to move past some of the old sort of rip and replace mantras, where you're telling people that in order to get value out of a platform, you inherently have to bite off this massive thing that takes years and years to do. And instead, you have to figure out ways to give people small, distributed, grassroots, bottoms-up ways to make progress. Help enlist more people in the process of rolling these things out and getting value out of them than just a small project team sponsored by the chief digital officer or by the CIO. Ideally, in concert with those people and their teams, so that they meet enterprise-grade standards. Like, this has to be a grassroots movement. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the same trap that we've ended up in previous generations of technology. That's our take.
Remember the old environmental saying of like, think globally, act locally. I think that applies a lot to when you think about digital transformation. You need this vision. You need to sort of set the North Star of where the organization is going, but then you need to empower these local teams to operate on their own in a path to get to that vision, to get that sort of grassroots bottom-up buy-in. And a tool that we've found has been really useful in that is design thinking. So really, we've been doing a lot of work enabling our clients to run these design thinking workshops where you're bringing small groups of stakeholders that are cross-functional. Gartner calls this fusion teams, where you have business people, IT people, but they're in a room collaborating, and they might be solving a very sort of small, specific problem, but their goal is to do something immediate and then prove out this iterative ability to expand up to something that can be more broadly distributed and scalable across the org.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be designed in these consumable chunks where you can see that success one step at a time. Even though you have that big vision and it's that big multi-year project or whatever, there has to be things that you can have happen quickly, and they make a big impact early, and then that you move forward.
I try to use
nice
this.
to-
Go
nice
ahead,
to-
Vijay.
Nice to see you again. I did see your face at our analyst event earlier today. Lovely to see you again. I wanted to say that, you can take an approach that's top down, or you can take an approach that's more bottoms up. So this is, for example, what if we simply made software or technology ubiquitous and discoverable by anybody, right? So then see how it gets taken up. So people have access to stuff. It's not they have to license everything. A lot of technology is available to a lot of people across the organizations, even people who you don't think would naturally use it. You're not going to serve marketing software to marketing people. You're going to serve software to all kinds of people in the company. So then they start to discover things, and the transformation happens from within small groups experimenting, small teams, individuals experimenting, finding the value, refining it, as opposed to some top-down driven plan, which says this is how we roll things out.
Yeah, I think finding wins is incredibly critical. I have this 2x2 I bother everybody with in our company, which is as you look at a customer experience and you put it on the 2x2 of like, how much change is it for the buyer? And then how relatively expensive is it? And then how are you sort of serving that need? So like one way to think of that is you buy a toothbrush, it's cheap and it's not a lot of change because you always buy a toothbrush. But when you walked in the aisle of the grocery store or the drugstore and 6 sales reps attacked you to talk about the toothbrush, it would be a disjointed experience. And so a lot of what we talk about is like, find the most egregious small pockets of experience and run a pilot on fixing those ones specifically. And if it's new technology, great. But what you want is wins and people saying, I want that thing over there. And that's like how you end up sort of building up traction, I find.
All right.
Did everybody
Thank
get in
you.
on that one? Good.
Yeah.
L. Nicole, as somebody just said, a LinkedIn user. I don't know his name, but we all know who he is. Actually.
Yes, we all know his name.
You shall not be named. Is that who you're referring to, Brian?
You never fail to,
No,
do
Yeah.
something.
it says Nicole never disappoints.
Yeah, that too. I was paraphrasing, but hey. All right, we will see L. Nicole and G-Con, as I like to call her, DigiConlin,
Sounds
in
good.
a few
Catch y'all
minutes.
later.
All right, folks, this has been great. It is coming close to the bewitching hour. So first of all, thank you for doing this. This has been great. All the comments that have been coming in have been awesome. Even the ones with the the bagels and the biscuits, that was good too.
Theremin comments.
Yeah. Requests for Don to play. All that stuff is really good. But I would just love for each of you to just give us a final thought, whatever you want to say. Take 30 seconds, a minute. Just give us one thing to look out for as we kind of move forward after all that we've been through over this past year. So I'll start with ladies first and Celia.
Thanks. Thanks for having this amazing experience to be on the panel. Really appreciate it. And just in terms of just listening to the conversation here, I think what keeps coming back to me is opportunity. I think it's an amazing time to focus on customer engagement or be in the customer experience area from a tech perspective, but then also you think about the impact that you can have working with the clients and the opportunities that we have to drive change and that better customer experience. It's a very cool time to be in the industry, and I think there's so much opportunity to drive an impact in a very positive way with technology.
Nice. Nick, first of all, Nick, you win. Like I said, before we started broadcasting, Nick wins the best background, and I like to call it Office Flair Award. And
nice.
Oh, yeah.
Bourbon.
Oh, so you only ship to Nick? Is that what happened?
No, you know how I didn't? That's literally the only bourbon I can't stand.
Was that Pappy thing you keep talking about?
No.
Woodford.
That was not Bullet. That was Bullet.
All right.
No, I'll just go quick. Brent and Paul. Thanks again to both of you. I love the players. Great honor to be with this group. Look, we're all competitors. We're all partners. Sometimes we're all good people, and I think that's the great thing. Life's too short for this industry with all, as Celia said, all the opportunity to be anything but an exchange of friendly commentary and dialogue. And the Playaz has become one of those special places where that can happen. So thank you.
Man, that's great. We definitely had that recorded, so we'll using it in a promo sooner or later.
Now I actually have to send bourbon. Damn.
There you go. All right, Vijay. First of all, Vijay, thanks for joining us. It's been a long 2 days because you guys have been putting on Zoho Analyst Day. Great event from an analyst perspective. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was certainly a pleasure. I love all the participants on this panel. I even learned from many of the comments here. I would leave you with this thought, maybe at the individual level and at the corporate level. We use the words empathy, we use the words compassion. Some of us are born with it, not all of us. And this is a good time to revisit that. At a corporate level, I think this is a good time to understand or crystallize what is your purpose? What are you really doing? What is the mark you want to leave behind? And I think times like this allow us to revisit that and either change course or reinforce what we did. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Thank you so much. That's great. Great stuff. All right. It's time for the captain.
I really just want to say thank you. This was really fun. I think it's what's really neat is that HubSpot is sort of in these conversations now. I think you guys have done a great job recognizing that we're doing some different things. So I personally appreciate being here. I think HubSpot appreciates being part of here. I hope it's the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And I really respect everybody on this call. I think we're in a really great industry. I think we're all really blessed, and we need to think about that a lot. So I look forward to more of these, and just thanks everybody so much.
Awesome, man. Next time, have the rubber bands with you.
Totally.
Okay, we're gonna have to finish up because we thought maybe there would be a guitar ending to.
Whoa!
With my arm.
Okay.
Awesome.
Don't I get to say what I liked about the panel though first?
You can do it while playing if you want.
No, it is so much fun and such an honor to talk with all these great people. I love Paul. Your culture of sort of virtual hugs comes through on all of these, and I think it's nice to have this and the Battle of the Bands was just such a burst of positivity in this world. And I think it's cool to be a part of it. So thank you. So I'll play you out with a little Paul Simon. I don't know if you'll hear this or not, because this isn't amped up, but I'll play us out for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, Mama Pajama rolled out of bed and she ran to the police station. When the papa found out, he began to shout, and he started the investigation. It's against the law. It was against the law. What the mama saw was against the law.
Oh, what? Absolutely. What more can we say after that?
Actually, we might as well just cancel the rest.
We'll just say once again, thanks to a great panel. We know you guys have things to do. We appreciate your time, but
You're
we
awesome.
great. We
amazing.
definitely expect to have you guys back on shows, sooner rather
Be
than
ready.
later.
Be ready. All
Thank
of
you. And thanks, Don, for taking us out, taking the panel out. That's great.
That's right.
I shouldn't
All right.
say it like that, but taking the
All right. I think most people got it.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you
guys.
all.
Thank you. Bye.
Pleasure being here.
Bye.
Wow. That was, let's get, oh, wait a minute. Don don't want to go. He wants to do another encore or something.
What a way to go out.
Yeah, what a way to go. You can't get that at any other CRM industry show.
No.
That just sounds funny saying that.
That was
Wow.
awesome.
Okay, man. That was. I can't believe that was 75 minutes. It went by so quick. So
No, it's
first
amazing.
impressions. First impressions.
Well, it was sort of expected, really. I mean, we picked a really great panel, and and their responses were unique, but also dovetailed with each other a great deal. Because one of the things that all of them, I think, reflected, and I thought this was sort of important, was this isn't a group that's sort of giving lip service to the fact that things have changed and are trying to continue.
There's
trying
some
to continue.
great-
I know. Well, we could just read some comments for a while.
I know. We really
I'm
could
probably
make a
good with
show out of
that.
just this.
We got hundreds of those too.
I was
Hundreds
wondering
of comments.
why Sven was kept woofing the Don.
Oh, that's what it was. Oh, okay. You
I
know
don't
what?
really-
It's funny. Well, and Don was talking about a personal look into everyone's personal life, and his dog wasn't even there. It's probably, I'm guessing it was over visiting Aunt Chen's dog. Who's always
Yeah, I was
there.
going to ready to say that's the dog I really can't wait to see next because it'll be in the same position that he was 4 months ago.
every time, every single time. I look, the thing I loved about the panel, and this isn't like show talk. This is like really, is you saw their actual human sides too. I mean, every one of them, and they're all really good people, and each of them had a very different perspective, although again dovetailed in different ways. But all of them understood, one, things have changed. Two, they've each of us has executed against the fact that things have changed in an empathetic way, and has had results, doing that. And the other thing, which I actually was, I would say, if I was surprised by anything relative to the panel, when we talk to the analysts, we'll see what they thought about the concepts and the ideas. But I'm just going to talk to the panel, which was, they had very specific, really good advice for people. Yeah. It wasn't just Catherine's question, but a lot of what you heard was highly specific advice on how to do specific things. And I thought that was something I was not fully expecting, because usually we're treating this more on the thought leadership side. And as you know, you and I being thought leaders, we're pretty vague about what we do, right? What we say. So, the thing is that really impressed me. So what about you? What do you think?
I love the frankness of the conversation, particularly, when you talk about the empathy and then dovetailing in the customer data privacy. I loved like the first gut responses to a lot of those things were just short, frank, sweet, no bull, no straight, no chaser kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I really appreciated. Of course, when you expound on those themes, it's good to expound on those themes, but the first reaction was usually very succinct, very straightforward, very ABC. And I love that, because they didn't give a lot of wiggle room for being squishy with some of those responses.
No.
And that should, if it starts with that kind of mindset, then the follow through should lead to something really critical and concrete, as opposed to fluffy and squishy, which sometimes fluffy and squishy can be good, especially when you have a nice fluffy biscuit, but not for processes and policies that are going to go into how customer experience is carried out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The thing is that when it boils down to it, we were dealing with an individual who not only was just a straightforward, honest person, but also very well represented their company, and kind of you could see the differences in how the company approached things, even though the general concepts were similar. How the difference in how companies approach things by the nature of the responses that we got from each of the panelists.
Yeah.
Each one of them was very specific to its company's personality.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but you're right. And I'll say this: we knew 4 of them really well.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure getting to know Lou.
He was awesome.
HubSpot. I thought he was great. He fits right in, and I think we've been fortunate enough to been around long enough in the industry that we kind of know the kind of people that would work well together on these kind of panels. And we're 2 for 2. I mean, everybody's been great on both of these panels.
Yeah, well, we have. We'll get to it later, but we'll talk about.
Meanwhile, Sven is still woofing here. Don, we'll have to figure out what exactly that means. But in the meantime, why don't we do this? Why don't we bring on? Wait, Elle. All right, she's ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't possibly Simpson style have a different trick every time you cut. I'm gonna drop that one right now.
So we got the players in residence. First, G. Conlon. We haven't seen you in about an hour and a half, so it's good to see you back again. And Elle Nicole. All right, so let me start with Ginger. What were your impressions of that 75 minutes?
Oh, panel was great. I just want to show everyone like 5 pages of notes.
Wow, written notes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Journalist.
Because in case like what I wanted to point out and didn't want to forget about it. So I highlighted a couple of things, and so one thing that stuck out to me, having written about sales, marketing, customer experience over like 30 years, it's fun to see the topics that come up again as new that are just, at a different stage of maturity depending on where you are, So when we were talking about front office versus back office, or front office joining with back office, that's one of those topics where, to Lou's point, it hasn't gotten the attention as other areas, but it's also, I just remember, I don't know, it's got to be at least 10, 12 years ago, we wrote an article about, it's Direct Marketing News, I think it was, about an insurance company that had changed their front office processes in terms of they outfitted their team to go and inspect cars after car accidents and things like that with like new technology. They were able to process more cars in a day, and et cetera, et cetera. And it was this amazing customer experience until you hit the back end where they hadn't made any changes. And all of the assessors on the back end, their desks were piling up with these, these assessments from the front end. And it's like, well, if you don't think about the whole process, and so, when the panelists were all talking about how you need to think about, don't make one change without thinking about how it impacts other places in the organization and how important that is, and thinking about business transformation, as Paul, you say all the time, it's not digital transformation, it's business transformation. And thinking about it that way, and that's when LinkedIn you make those decisions that make sense across the organization. So that was one thing, and there's other stuff, but I don't want to hog the whole time. So
I'm
Nicole,
gonna respond to that, Ginger, and then I might add something in there too. I thought that was really interesting as well, and I put a note in our little back channel thread as well. There's a really important question here, whether we even need this distinction between front office and back office anymore. And conceptually, we really don't. But practically, we need, we have this challenge within large organizations and even not that large organizations of breaking things down into, manageable chunks, and to do that within organizations and teams where people have the power to go and do something about it. So, making these problems, taking away the conceptual structures that help to break down those challenges is a problem, but it's also an opportunity. And what really strikes me about this, and I think, again, this is one of those byproducts of the most unusual last year that we've all experienced. We always talk, especially as analysts and industry commentators and observers, about the big digital native examples of companies and how they operate. And everybody inevitably brings up Amazon at some point in a CX discussion. What's interesting to me is Amazon as a business, and Brent, you're the one here who's the real expert on this, operates in a fundamentally different way to any other type of company. And I'm not suggesting that every business will eventually work in a similar way to Amazon, but I think what this last year has taught us, and I think it's reflected in the panel conversation here, is that companies have figured out that they really do need to change the way they think about how they operate and change the way they operate. And the tools are actually critical to making that happen. They are necessary but not sufficient, but they are really, really important stepping stones or catalysts to making that happen. And I feel like what each of our panelists gave us was, a slightly different take on not so much the tools, interestingly, but really some of those other things, those attitudes and those approaches that need to be different within businesses in order to use those tools and to make those changes effectively. So I'm totally with you. It's a fascinating shift in the way that we frame the problem and how we're going to go about tackling it.
Yeah. And then one of the other things that stood out when we were talking about data privacy, I think it was Nick who made the point of, if you show people the value, they'll opt in to share their data. And there's studies on that and how true that is. And, so I thought that was a great point. Nicole, anything you want to say before I go to any other topic?
That was one of those topics where I was right at the edge of my chair going, what are people going to say here? And what struck me is there were a lot of good perspectives on that. I mean, those of us who follow Zoho know Zoho particularly has a very strong stance on data privacy and is probably one of the extreme outliers in the technology or business software space on that. But it was interesting. I think everybody on that panel and all of their companies have a not too distant view on that as well, which is fundamentally, we need more data privacy. We need more respect of customers' data and customers' privacy. And there were some very different kind of thoughts, but not necessarily mutually exclusive or opposing thoughts on how to tackle that, whether it is striving to be ahead of regulation or, striving not to have to worry about regulation, because as businesses, we are making the right kinds of decisions fundamentally about how we value our customers and how we value their privacy, and that kind of self-regulation approach that Dawn talked about too. I mean, I think there are a lot of really interesting ideas there. The consistent thread to me that was really important is that every one of these executives and every one of their businesses is really thinking about this and doing something about it. I would like to see them do more. And I think there's an interesting commentary here that as an industry, I think we can come together to do more effectively. And everybody's kind of waiting, sitting back a little bit and with a few exceptions, kind of waiting to see what happens on a regulatory basis. But I think there's a huge opportunity to step forward, both in terms of whether that's a kind of self-governance approach, but also very much in leading the thinking about how companies can do things in a way that does not create that kind of inherent conflict that Vijay described, I thought, very well, between their primary business model and the way that they look at and think about customer data privacy.
Yeah. Actually, in the comments, Ari Hoffman made a great point about how relevancy impacts trust. And if you think about, when a company follows you around on the internet, for example, like how much it bothers you, I think depends on how well you like that brand, and whether they're actually, you care about them and want them to follow you.
Yeah, but it's back to that relationship, and you can have a relationship with an entity, but ultimately that relationship is fostered by the individuals that you're interacting with, whether directly or not, right? And I think Nitin's point about this going beyond data privacy, and it's a question of agency, I think plays into that, because it is about the relationship. It's not just about the policy. It's about the personality of the business and the way that they choose to operate, and the way that they make decisions and the way that they prioritize. And what was really cool to me about this panel, and Paul mentioned it, was I think that really came through. I mean, as individuals, everybody on this panel just is a heavy hitter. There's no other way of describing them. But I think they really do convey both their own individual perspectives on this, and very much perspectives on how their companies view these big issues in the world. And I think that's an often overlooked bit of insight. If you're looking at who you want to partner with, who you really want to invest in as a long-term technology provider, those kinds of factors are extremely meaningful, because they're what shape how they operate and how they invest in their roadmap going forward as much as anything else.
Yeah. One thing that kind of bridges what we're talking about to the next topic I want to bring up is Vijay said that as an employee, you shouldn't have to request to be empathetic. And, I feel like that kind of carries over from what we were saying to the empathy topic, which one of the things that that Nick said that stood out was, you need to give permission to your team to talk about mental health and be vulnerable. And the thing that struck me in another part of the conversation, answer to Catherine's question about leadership, was, everyone was talking about modeling behavior. And I think that if you, along with giving people permission, you need to demonstrate it first, because a lot of people, that's one area that a lot of people aren't going to be comfortable sharing about unless they really feel like it's a safe space. And one of the best ways to show that it's a safe space is for you to be open first, in the most appropriate way, obviously.
It's interesting, because between empathy for customers, recognizing and acknowledging mental health, the issue of diversity of people, of opinions, of points of view, of experience, the decision-making approaches. I mean, for me, the sort of higher order point there that was fascinating, that absolutely permeated the whole discussion, was this idea that we fundamentally need to change corporate culture around how we operate. And it's impossible to have a conversation about the relationship between customer experience and employee experience, for example, unless you address this very fundamental and yet all too often unspoken assumption about how companies operate. And I think you see increasingly how stark the divide is between businesses that are very command and control and top down, and businesses that have figured out that you have to federate decision-making, you have to devolve decision-making, and you have to empower employees, you have to give them the right tools and the right information, and you have to trust them to make decisions. And it was interesting that just about everybody on the panel made that point in some way during the conversation. Yeah. But this is fundamental to how you have to operate in this environment, because command and control simply doesn't work when you aren't in one physical space. And it is, I think, probably the most significant trend that we spend the least amount of time talking about. And it is absolutely part and parcel of this business transformation, focus on the customer kind of transition, that all of these companies are helping to make possible. But it only happens when you make those kinds of organizational and operational and culture changes along with it. And, to me, it's very exciting and inspiring, because this is going back to this idea of really investing in people and believing that this is actually an investment that's going to pay off very substantially. And again, that was one of those things that for me really came through from each of these execs and from their companies to a large degree, that this is something they all fundamentally believe in. And as Nick said, he was borrowing the quote about optimism being the greatest free stimulus out there. If you can inspire people to really be part of something that they want to be involved in, that's incredibly powerful. And that to me was kind of an undercurrent of the whole conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And I think that's where employee engagement, impacts customer engagement, because it's not just a happy employee, means a happy customer. I think it's an empowered employee is more going to be a happy, turn out.
Yeah, whose job it is to make that customer happy, and not to do it in a nonsensical way, but to do it in a substantive and meaningful way.
All right. We just wanted to step out because you didn't need us sitting around.
Yeah. We actually went out and had bagels. I had a plain, he had blueberry. Brent had a blueberry.
Made some biscuits while you were taking it out. And...
Yeah. I'm gonna need to run and get a snack for the rest of this because now all this food talk has made me hungry.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing left in the green room anymore. So you might want to go get your own stuff. All right. Well, thanks as always to the Playaz in residence, Ginger G. Conlon. Am I the only one that calls it that? Probably.
L. Nicole and G. Con.
I like L. Nicole and G. Con. Yeah,
L. Nicole and G. Con.
Those are our DJ names as well.
That works, man. L. Nicole and G. Con, man.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, ladies.
We
will talk to you later.
All right.
See you a little later.
All
Au revoir.
right. Wow. Au revoir. We got some.
I'm trying to talk to Sven.
You could pick a language. You'll be able to talk.
I mean, he's the only. I'm so jealous of his linguistic capabilities.
All right. Next up, rapid round. Analysts, thought leaders, industry observers, good people. I'd like to say that. Here we are. Rebecca, get that mic on there, Rebecca.
Hey guys, how we doing?
Dennis.
Hey.
Greetings.
DP. Marshall.
Howdy. That background. Looking good.
The hills are alive with the sound of analysts.
I'm just glad to see Dennis, and I don't see like Steve Gilmore anywhere in the pictures. So this is a different thing.
Amazing how that works. You got to wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll see him there tomorrow, of course. But thanks, first of all, for hanging out and checking out the panel. And let's start with ladies first. We'll talk with Rebecca. First impressions, Rebecca, what did you think?
Really interesting. I thought it was fun and an interesting switch that basically CX vendors, when approached with the question of empathy, started with employees. We think about the parallels between CX and EX. Customer CRM has come first, right? It came first in cloud, it came first in AI, it came first in analytics, and all of these things. Are we seeing with the whole shift with work from home where it turns itself on its head and employee experience starts leading CX in certain ways?
It's a great question. Well, interesting. Can you hear me? I'm just going to talk. Yes, we can. Question. It brings to mind the 2019 statement on the purpose of a corporation by the Business Roundtable in August of that year. It basically said that the old model of shareholder capitalism, corporations exist to make profits for their shareholders, is becoming obsolete and being replaced with stakeholder capitalism, which includes responsibilities, duties in one way or another to not only shareholders, but also employees and customers and business partners and local communities. And I've been writing about this for a year or two now. But a lot of what was discussed kind of dovetails into that. It's almost like there's this need, sort of almost unexpressed, in the world for a broader view of the corporate social responsibility.
Well, I think it is expressed. We just don't see it expressed enough at the levels of corporate governance that we're used to talking to. I too have had these feelings for a very long time that when a company's sole goal is to make money at all costs, where it's just about fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, people are going to get screwed. That is what has caused markets to crash over and over again. It causes misery. The stakeholder model that you were talking about and that we've read about is much more conducive to a reasonable life.
It is, and what's interesting about it is that Mark Benioff, in one way or another, as long as we're talking about CRM, has been espousing various tenets of this idea for years.
Very true.
And he's
yeah.
running his company that way.
And if I were into blessing things, I would say bless him for it. He's definitely a leader in that. It helps that Salesforce is way at the top of its game, way at the top of the market. What impresses me is these companies that aren't. They're just businesses going about their business. They are not the leaders. They are not the number one. They might be number one in a niche, but they're not the absolute top. They have that same level of corporate responsibility and concern.
But I would argue too, Marshall, that it goes back to, what some of us heard a little bit from Zoho in their analyst day today, and even more broadly for them as a company about, these cultural values and culture being capital. At the end of the day, that capital, whether it's people or money or infrastructure, is important. And what they've said is the people is a key part of it. And if we look, Dennis, at some of the work and looking at CSR and philanthropy, employees are more and more voting with their feet to join organizations that share their values and support their values. And that in turn makes them more productive and more valuable as employees.
Oh, not only that, I did a study on this last year. It causes the employees to willfully give better word of mouth to the public about products and services, and also the company as a place to work, and numerous other benefits too. I was really surprised. And to your other point about just everyday companies doing these things, that's what my research showed as well. Most of the companies that I surveyed, and I surveyed over 500, had never heard of Pledge 1%, the pledge1%.org, the organization that will help you establish a 111 program in your own company. And it's got 10,000 members. Anyhow.
And by the way, for anybody who hasn't read Dennis's report, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of good stuff there. So there's your plug, Dennis.
Oh, well, thank you. No, that was the other report, though. That was the one on cleaning the toilets.
Oh, the cleaning the toilets one is a good one too, about how people would rather clean their toilets than deal with their CRM and with their CX systems. I think one of the other things that jumped out at me that I was thinking about, we spent a lot of time kind of kumbayaing with the panel today talking about empathy, but I was very curious about how, has the pandemic changed how they compete? Now, not everybody on the panel today was sort of head-to-head competitors, but software can be a pretty cutthroat business, right? And wondering if the way we're thinking about retaining customers today and those relationship with customers, has the software sales business gotten any less cutthroat? Not just for the folks on the panel today, but for the industry in general.
I think it hasn't gotten less competitive, but I think the things we compete about change over time. What I'm seeing these days is that software is actually probably number 2 or number 3 in people's minds. People buy whole product more than ever these days, which includes not only the software, but the training and support, the vibe you get from being part of that community. And as a result, I think organizations have to change the way they're approaching the market. You can't go out into the marketplace trying to sell software the way you did 20 or 30 years ago. It's just a very different place.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the impact of cloud, right? I have to not just sell customers once, but keep them satisfied year in, year out. I guess I was more curious about how, if the spirit of empathy and collaboration has extended at all to the sales process. So I'm officially the Pollyanna on the panel today. I don't.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, it's different from organization to organization, but I don't have numbers, but from what I have seen, the sales team is the last to change in terms of empathy, because their goal at the end of the day is still keep the money coming in. And
it has to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's the job, and more is always better, and you have quotas. At this moment, it is not a good time to be hiring 100 salespeople to fill 70 seats and doing that sort of competition, but it is still a time when businesses need to stay alive. So empathy second, sales first. That said, everything we've been advising for however long we've been advising it, the consultative sale, problem solving first, as opposed to product selling, it's made a difference. It certainly has. I've seen that. I think it's going to continue to make a difference.
Yeah, and the comments from the panel and the folks listening in shows certainly, they're selling products. They still have to make their commissions. Ultimately, that's how salespeople are sold. But the solution one is an important point. We've heard about the solution sale forever, and I would argue that a very small percentage of software sales are usually there, but a big part of that is the industry part. And Dennis, you made an interesting comment, I thought, earlier about sort of industry best practices. And obviously there's a lot of industry investment going on in building out industry solutions and that sort of thing. But I wonder if we're maybe we're pushing the gas a little bit too much on the industry stuff. And do we risk sort of saying industry solution becomes a translation for this is the way we've always done things, as opposed to really looking at digital transformation in some of these industries?
That's an interesting question. It reminds me of a study I did about 15 years ago where it was in the insurance industry. And we were trying to find out why so many insurance companies were building their own CRM instead of buying something off the shelf. They could at least customize it and it'd take less time. And the insurance companies I talked to said, no, there's just not enough in those packages yet.
Yeah. And
maybe we're getting close to that point, but it takes a lot to have an industry-specific solution.
Right.
At a time.
Right.
Do we have time? Yep, I guess we don't.
It's a nice wrap up. I just want to say, Pollyanna Wetman. That kind of has a nice, nice.
Shades. You got two nicknames now, Shades and Pollyanna.
Yeah, because you are still a blues sibling.
Building by the day.
Yeah, shout out to Anand Thakur, by the way, her other blues sibling.
That's right. Blues sibling.
Dennis, by the way, do you have a study for everything? Because you
Yes, he does.
I'm such a geek. I don't think you'd have me on this show if I didn't have a study for everything.
What I'm missing is the Gilmore Gang gets the cat. You don't have the cat with you today?
Well, I have 3 and they're all sleeping. I tried to see who was up for it, but Paul's got 4 or 5 or 6. I don't know. Paul, we're Paul's cats.
They're definitely not in this room. I'll tell you that. Otherwise, I would be literally talking through a cat on my face most of the time.
Exactly.
And
on the floor.
Hey, I just got to say one thing. Sven's last comment. Little TMI there, Sven. Little TMI. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, look. It's better. Yeah. He thought it was better than working in his CRM.
All right. Well, let's just thank our 3 buddies, Pollyanna Wetman, Dennis Pombrand, Marshall Lager. As you can see, the comments that keep coming. So you kept the conversation going great. And thanks again for being here. And, stand by your email. You never know when you're going to get called to duty again. So
that's right. Thank you, guys. You guys are awesome. Take
care. That was great.
That was great.
All right.
What? I actually like being off the air too. That part.
Yeah, I actually like listening and
Yeah.
checking them out. Good stuff. And guess what?
Lot
We
to
got a
hear.
couple other folks to listen to and check out.
What?
There's we need a little lighting. What are you in a cave or something?
Yeah.
Get that Gatorade swig in there, man. You got to get yourself lubricated up there.
Today's the day the plumber had to come to fix the hot water heater. So I mean,
Oh, this is gonna be interesting.
man.
you
All right,
want to
that's
be,
all
I
right.
know that's where the lights go, and then you say,
Oh no, that's quite all right, man. Because we got a buddy that's going to help you out here.
wait a minute.
There he is,
There's my
the bad boy of ERP himself.
That's right.
The one and only.
B-burp. We're now calling B-burp. B-burp.
Here, is
B-B-E-R.
that better? Am I better lit now?
Yeah, you look a little better, man. The cave is a little better lit, and now
We
I
have
have to tell you,
Josh is lit, and then we have B-burp.
I wish.
now this is gonna.
Bourbon. Don't talk to me about bourbon.
I do have an announcement to make that impacts the panel here. Unfortunately, Kevin Permitter from IDC will not be able to make it. I don't know if these two will be able to fill up the conversation that he had, but we'll see if this works out. First of all, thanks, guys. I know it's been a long day because you were all over at the Zoho thing first and foremost, and then you had to come over here, but we appreciate it. And let's start with Josh. First impressions of what you heard from the panel, man.
Obviously, awesome panel, and seriously, you guys just know how to bring the right people, the good right people, good and right people to the job, and I'm really impressed by that. I think we hit a lot of really good topics, and empathy is a big one for me. I think that's important. I think we talked about a little bit about privacy security, and I want to sort of throw a challenge out to the industry because obviously, this is CRM Playaz, and CRM is really sort of in that business of deep personalization of, how should I say it, aiding and abetting a surveillance economy that is coming up right upon us, if not overwhelming us already. And I think the challenge is, the empathy that we saw at the top here is sincere. I think they're really good people who have good hearts. I think that there's a problem with how do we keep those good hearts in front of a business that's based on a capitalist model that doesn't take prisoners, and we talked about that as well in terms of what is important. At the end of the day, can we have empathy down at the sales execution layer? These are big issues, but I think that I would start with privacy security and this whole CRM marketing market. You gotta really sit there and think carefully. Are you unleashing the next disaster on society by enabling this incredible multi-channel and incredible deep personalization experience?
B-burp? What are you thinking?
They're thinking never inviting Josh again.
Yeah.
Come on, revive, dude. Like, come on.
Can I tee up here? Are we ready?
Uh-oh. He's ready to unleash,
right.
folks. Just sit back, relax.
Okay. Well, okay. So just one quick thing. I did miss the last 35 minutes. So if I repeat something obvious, sorry about that. But I did catch the rest. The one thing I really wanted to say is that ordinarily, after a 2 hour or so event, listening to vendors, I'm in a grouchy mood, and I'm not today. So that's a really good sign. Wow. And I think it's because your panel was so thoughtful and thorough in terms of talking about every issue from data privacy to respecting well-being of what we're going through and keeping it real and not sugarcoating it. I was just totally impressed by the caliber of that conversation. Now, having said that, there's always a few things that are gonna stick in my craw a little bit. This whole back office thing, I just want to stop when someone says it. Especially when they attribute it to me, I get kind of pissed off because I don't think of myself back office at all. What I want to do is follow transformation wherever it leads, and I want to call BS on anything that gets in the way of that, and I want to document the lessons. And the one thing is you start thinking about back office, you really get into trouble. And as your panel pointed out, employees are crucially important. And so in a sense, you're always facing a stakeholder that matters. So there's no back office and everything is being automated. So, CRM is automating the hell out of processes. And that's probably the one thing I would want to do, which is to totally call BS on hyper personalization and just this AI snake oil that's being sold to customers. And it's expensive snake oil too, and it doesn't work. So we could talk a little bit about that perhaps. And finally, I'll just mention that one thing that did make me grouchy this afternoon was this Goldman Sachs headline about this retread executive who's saying basically that he can't wait to force people back to work again into their office, and calls this whole new normal an aberration. And my point would actually be the reverse, which is I think, we're here to stay in these habits that we develop. Now, look, there is going to be some return, and we're all looking forward to some of the vestiges of getting together in person. And I totally understand. And I don't want to simplify this Goldman Sachs piece because we could discuss it as a group. But I think that's
first of all, did that just happen? Because I haven't heard. I don't know what you're talking about, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, it's ripped from the headlines, dude. I'm newsjacking, man. I'm like pulling stuff right off the wires for you.
And ripped from the headlines, man.
And look, ordinarily I would say, well, let's compete on different models of return to work and see which one works better. But unfortunately, when you're talking about the well-being and safety of employees, I can't get on board with that. So, but anyway, we could talk about it.
Damn, you just threw down a gauntlet, man. I mean, I thought you said you weren't grouchy at the top of that, but I don't know, man.
That's not grouchy, John.
Yeah, this is me in a good mood. No, but seriously, guys, the panel was amazing. So I can only I can't poke holes in anything they said. So.
Wow, that says a lot.
No one stuck their foot in their mouth. I mean, seriously, everyone had a really, I think I can think of a couple of CEOs or executives you could have invited on who would have definitely disagreed. And
I really appreciated their handling of the data privacy thing.
100%.
We all know that's one of the hot button issues, and there's a lot of thoughts on both sides of that spectrum. Some of them are actually, there's some points on both sides that you could kind of say, yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I can understand that. But it's kind of hard to talk about it when you're at this, a C level at a company that is really, customer experience is what they're all about. So I thought all of them handled that with the kind of, they were sharp and concise, but they also had a good reason for being sharp and concise on those things.
Yeah. The thing with each of them is you're looking at, again, I don't know Lou very well, but for the most part, these are pretty seasoned executives and they're seasoned business people. They've been around a while and they know their stuff. And the other side is they're just generally, look, ultimately, the thing that interests me about any of these people is that they're nice people, really. Ultimately, that's what I like about them. Yep. And, their ideas are going to be, if you to what both Nicole and I were both talking about is they really are, you could literally see how their company works is in the answers that they gave. And it was very specific in each case, so, and what fascinated me, and it really continues to, is, I've spent, 20 plus years in the CRM market, obviously, and I'm one of the people who's propagated sales, marketing, and customer service being where CX is and where CE is, but that's not true. It's not that it's false. It's just that it's basically part of the whole package. But the thing that always, to me, historically, has always pointed up this, and both of you guys can talk to this, I know really well, is even prior to the pandemic and anything, if you couldn't figure out the impact the supply chain has on customer experience, you're literally, you're pretty much just stupid, I guess is about the only thing I could say. You're really stupid, right? I feel like it's obvious. And I think, but it's always underemphasized by the way I've talked about it for 20 years. And one of the things I used to like about SAP was when they had supplier relationship management, right? Because it was sort of, even though that wasn't strictly what it was about, it was kind of seeing the gap a little bit, and they actually were able to do some things with that. So I would really want to hear more on your perspective on and following through on that particular idea, because I think it's critical now that people really get this and get this really, really, really clearly and well.
I think I may even said this on one of your panels. Supply chain is the new CRM. I mean, I say that as a joke, but I don't. I think the same way we want to break down this artificial back office, front office, we need to break down the whole artificial TLA world, I like to say the biggest mistake most vendors make is they try to sell product the way they build it, not the way it's consumed or the customer wants to consume it. And I think we're all, the industry as a whole is guilty of that. And this notion now that every supply chain VP's job is to deliver product to a customer. Every customer VP's job is to make sure that there's a full 360-degree sort of cycle, and that customer is a renewable resource to the company and a happy, successful one. And it means everything touches everything. It's a deeply interconnected world, and I think these silos are complicated. I'm going to also add that culture, we saw a good example of culture at the top and how important it is. Every one of those people, as you said, are wonderful. And I think Rebecca and Marshall talked about this a couple minutes ago. Got to drive that down to the sales level. That is the huge lacuna in this whole industry. Is we have this cultural shift at the top about customer success. Ain't happening, enough in my view at the bottom. And John and I have been involved in some stuff about that this week as well. So I think it's a big deal. I'll shut up. Go, John.
I just want to send a special shout out to Jeff Risher because he finally got his LinkedIn security settings so we can see his name. Every time I see LinkedIn user, I just immediately think it's Esteban, but
that's me too.
There's more than one LinkedIn user out there. So,
well, look, I mean, I think, no one should talk about silver linings with the pandemic, but I think everything has been exposed, right? And so supply chains got exposed as well, and I think to some extent, like greedy customers got exposed as far as like. We need to learn to have empathy for what companies are going through also. And we all need to do a much better job of being transparent in our humanity. And if there's one good thing that came out of all of this, it's that we got a more of a human sense of each other. You guys talked about that earlier, about how seeing people at home and stuff in their environs gives you a better sense of who they are. And I think we need to keep our eyes on the prize, but step back from the religion of like, oh, if I didn't get my delivery in an hour, I'm all pissed off today. It's like, well, there's human beings in this equation all along the way that are working their asses off to get you your product. And but yeah, these disparate systems are really getting exposed. And I think the other thing that's kind of getting exposed is the Amazons and the giants of the world. Yeah, they have one way of doing things, which in some sense is deeply problematic. And so, but the opportunity is to compete against it and to find all the white space that they aren't taking up. And that to me is what's exciting. And that, I think your panel touched on that quite a bit with data, but this whole notion of like earning customer trust through opt-in is such a dramatically more interesting way of personalizing stuff. I remember talking to a web designer a while back who was like, oh, I can get you all the data you need on everyone who's on your site. And I'm like, dude, that's a bunch of black hat bullshit. Like I don't want data on people who haven't given it to me because they're not true customers yet. Don't you get that?
Yeah,
no,
man.
I mean, the problem is not enough people get that.
They don't get, or they're afraid to because there's a cost to them asking that question up front versus being sorry for it.
I mean, I did a blog post. I fired Amazon this year. Part of it is because Alexa kept asking me to positively ID my voice as opposed to just do voice, just go from speech recognition to voice recognition. It's a huge security leap, privacy leap. I looked through every user agreement I could find on every portion of the Amazon site. I never gave Jeff Bezos permission to do that. And I have no control over what he does with that, including creating a next generation recognition system he can sell to police states all over the globe. So no, opt me out on that stuff.
So is the issue that you didn't have the choice up front? Because it doesn't appear like they've at least from my perspective, I haven't seen an instance of them misusing the data, like
You know
doing
about
something.
the facial recognition with a K.
Well, then they cut that off though. I thought
They
like them and
temporarily-
IBM and Microsoft kind of like.
They temporarily suspended it. They did not kill it, and the heroes of the algorithmic Justice League have been on their asses about it.
What are those heroes on the Google AI ethics side?
They are real
They're having
people.
some,
No,
they're
I'm
having some
talking about-
issues there.
Look them up. Algorithmic Justice League. They're leading.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No.
The
George
AJL.
Wallen is one of my heroes, and they've been nailing. There's a great documentary called The Coded Gaze. Everyone should be watching about this.
What's it called again? Coded Gaze?
Coded Gaze. Just look up Jovial Joy. Go to Twitter and go @Jovial Joy.
Jovial Joy, man.
She's amazing. Seriously, heroic. You'll
I'll
fall
have to do that. All right, guys. This has been great. We could actually take this a lot further.
Yeah, man. I'll put some popcorn on and we'll just keep going, man.
I'm actually, I'm kind of tired.
Come on, it's only been like 3 hours, dude. Come on.
Yeah, we got a party coming up in a couple.
I got a DJ tonight.
Yeah.
Come on, I got a DJ tonight.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is great, guys. This is a
Yeah.
great way for us to end this thing. Especially getting the additional information on the Goldman dude that's really, screwing things up out there. So
yeah, to be fair, he also cares about his apprenticeship culture. So it's not. I'm simplifying his argument. And I do think young people are being deprived of an apprenticeship environment right now that is hurting them. So we could have a longer conversation about that. But hey, that's not today's topic. So
hey, I'm just saying if Pollyanna Wetman says the algorithmic Justice League is real, it's real. So
Look them up. Seriously.
AJL.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking it up. All right, guys. Thanks. Thanks, man. This
All
is
right,
great.
guys.
Thank you both.
Get you on the rebound.
We'll
Thank
see you
you.
somewhere around the line.
See you tonight. See you tonight.
All right.
So to speak.
Wow. It's long, but great. That was great. We didn't even have any technical difficulty. Remember the first time around, we had some. Everything was great today. The panel is great. We knew they were going to be great. And the folks that were participating in the comment section, they were great. I couldn't be more happy about how this
minutes. You got to realize there are 6 minutes left to have a technical difficulty, right?
Well, if LinkedIn decides to go down now, okay, that's fine. Look, John doesn't want to go away. Well, John,
I missed you guys, man. Can we do this again? It's fun. Let's pop back online, man.
Hey, you plug you do LinkedIn Live now. You talk a little bit about yours.
Yeah.
before we go.
Right.
Dude,
Show
I got
plug,
I got a great show tomorrow, man. I do kind of a cleanup round because you do like 3 shows a week to like, and by the time people are like, God, I can't watch another show because Brent just like filled me up with content that they can come at my show and just yell at me for an hour.
No, they just don't want to see me anymore. So that's perfectly fine.
But it's cool. It's every Friday around 4 Eastern time. Sometimes it varies a little bit, and I'm just trying to have a very interactive. It's almost modeled after sports talk radio, but just constant stream of interaction from the audience, and try to tackle mostly things that are real on projects and learning about the enterprise by what works and what doesn't. We usually have snarky countdowns, top 5 things that bother you the most to kind of loosen things up because it's Friday. So tomorrow I got a really nice one on CX and hyper personalization and context versus outcomes, and it's right up your alley, guys. So if you want to pop in, I've got Matthew Sweezy of Salesforce coming in.
Talked to him earlier this week.
God, man.
But he and I have a beef that goes back a couple of years around context and AI personalization versus what I call opt-in communities, and so it's going to be a real.
This is going to be a good one.
Yeah,
it's definitely going to be a good one.
Yeah,
I'm going to check this out.
So anyway,
hey, John,
sorry to crash your show again.
No, it's okay, man. Terminologically, I side with you.
All right, man.
I am right there with you.
All right.
Let me ask
communities, not hyper personalization.
Let me ask you. Let me get your take on this branding. Social audio.
Social audio. What other kind of audio? What other kind of audio is there?
See, that's what I'm talking about.
I hate the term. Anti-social audio?
I hate that term. I'm sorry. Anyway, yes. So what, Mark? Oh, look, Marshall's doing a shameless plugs.com. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Having some fun. It's Finn. So as soon as I said we've had pretty much a perfect tech day, here comes Finn. Some short video freezing. Maybe that's some international thing, but we didn't have it on our end. So you're not raining on our parade, Finn. We were good.
That's right. This worked. This worked. Okay.
That's right. All right, Mr. Bad Boy of
All right, sorry, Krat. I thought you were
gonna be D-Burp, man. You're always welcome.
That was awesome, man. That was great. Man.
D-Burp and Lit Josh. That's like a new group. D-Burp and Lit Josh.
I like broadcast audio better than social audio. I'll give you that much.
Yeah, it's not quite the same though.
No, I know, but I still
concept.
Like Ginger. I know. It's just
I know.
And then Sven, and I know Sven thinks we're going to segue into. Remember, we went the whole 2.5 hours without saying the CH word.
Yeah, no, I know.
And we're not going to do it. We're not going to.
Not happening.
Don't worry,
Sven.
not Dory, Sven. We're not going to do it. We're gonna get out of here. I'm just going to say thanks to everybody. That was great.
Yeah.
It couldn't have gone any better, I don't think. And that means number 3. Want to tease number 3 a little bit? Coming up in April.
So April 22nd, 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, so we're taking a different approach this time. So we're still determining the number. It's 4 or 5, and we have some commitments already. We're gonna have a panel, executive roundtable, but this time it's not gonna be vendors. It's gonna be private equity firm, VCs, vendor. Well, I guess there is some vendors, vendor investment arms. We're going to have those kind of people on, and
an angel.
Idea is, and oh, thank you, and an angel. So that gives us 4 there, and it may be a 5th. We'll figure it out then. But the concept is this: look, there's 1 million people. We're constantly talking about acquisitions on the giant scale. We're talking about acquisition on small scale, little companies, exit strategies, or acquisition, and and when you look at the landscape of VCs and PE firms and angels and the like, you see 2 things. One is VC and PE firms and angels operate differently. 2 is, yes, they will be, of course, Marshall. That's right, but they're going to give pitches. That's what they're going to give money, right? So and they operate differently, and they also have different personalities in terms of when they acquire, or when they take a minority interest in the company, and when they sit on a board, how they operate within those companies. Some of them are just brutally shark-like, and other ones are they may acquire, but they also invest in the company's future to make the company work better. So we've already got some commitments for the panel. I'm not saying who yet.
Can I tease one, because he did confirm already?
He was actually on. He was also on.
He was on too. That's why
he was on today. Yeah, go ahead. Go right ahead.
So, what representing the VC firms is going to be Scott Beachuk from Norwest Venture Partners, and they're a big guy. So we're glad to have him on. That's just the one tease. We won't tease anything else. But since
we have
I saw him
working.
comment, he was the one that threw in that comment about Theridion. I think he was, wasn't he?
He exactly. He was the one. That was comment 211, I think, if I remember correctly.
So we're looking forward to that, because it is a little different, but it's so interesting what's going on, and we're lucky to have some folks that we actually have personal relationships with that are on all those kind of different areas of mergers, acquisitions, venture capital, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and again, we may pick 5, and there may be representatives of one category twice. There may be 2 representatives. We don't know yet, but we're still working on some details. But be ready for this one. It's going to be different. And then, as always, this time the analysts will be talking more about the whole M&A world, what's going on there, and how they look at acquisitions, and how they look at even things like pricing, because you wouldn't believe the number of discussions and arguments that, wow, they paid this much for that. How could they do that? I mean, there's those kind of discussions going. And honestly, the little companies in our industry really are relatively clueless on what to do about those kind of things. So this should be a good one. This should be a real, and hey, Derek, I didn't know you were on, but I'm glad to see you, my friend. I've known Derek 20 some odd years. He was my nephew's first friend, and he used to work at my company where I was the VP of marketing. That's how I met him.
Wow. 27 years?
That was in
years?
the 90s. Let's see,
90s?
it was 1996. So what is that? 20?
Oh, that's 25 years.
25 years. 25 years.
Same as Zoho. 25.
That's right. I've known Derek as long as Zoho's been around.
but still, the man who still knows you longer than that, Stephen LeMay, he still holds the title.
There's only one person who knows me even longer than that.
Yeah,
my
non-family member. Yeah,
my brother. Right.
We're sticking to non-family.
Well, yeah, Don's been to misses by a couple of days.
Should have been in that first class there, Don. But,
that's right. Journalism.
All right. School. So, any last things before we get out of here?
Nah, I'm ready to go.
I'm ready to. It's been a long but great day, and the day is really continuing because we're going back to the Zoho. What do we call that? The social or something?
The Zoho social hour.
I have my kazoo.
I haven't gotten that stuff yet. I have none of it.
I am ready for my kazoo lessons. So yeah.
Oh yeah. One of the things I will tell you about that social hours. Apparently, since Brent and I are now media moguls and make or break like bands, RMD Zoho's band Renu Mani
RMD
Renu Mani Dosa, which stands for Dosa 2 a.m. Dosa's Indian thing. It's food. So they're going to actually perform, and one of the reasons that they're so prominent is because of they came in second for best band in the BYOB 2020. And one last thing, there will be some announcements fairly soon about BYOB 2021, but we'll let you know.
We definitely will. And by the way, I'm just going to put this comment up again. Yeah, thanks for letting us know, Mac, that you were still in college. Yeah.
I think I knew you, Mac, when you were probably 2 years out of college, right? So.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah, I have it in my house, though. It's not getting shipped anywhere.
Yeah, I can't drink and DJ. It's against the law, so I will stay away from that. All right. So in the meantime, I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
We are the CRM Playaz. We are tired and we are out. We'll see you next week. Oh, wait a minute.
Yes.
I can't end it until you see this.
Right. It's official.
All right. Here we go.